kick off very shortly with an address from Councillor Deirdre Costigan, who's Deputy Leader of the Council, bringing an Ealing Council perspective to the climate emergency and the opportunities for the local business community. Then we'll turn to Jessica Lobo of the UN Global Compact Network UK. Jessica will introduce the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and put climate action in the context of those wider SDGs, as well as introducing what is a global campaign, Race to Zero, and also outlining what the COP26 summit means for the UK and business as it's arriving in not so many months' time. We're then going to hear from a business locally, Ivor Tucker of the Oak Network, on what they're doing to support action on climate change and reducing carbon emissions, before we turn to my colleagues Barney and Jane to talk about the Race to Zero West London campaign and toolkit, and what you can find on our website to help you along the way. They will hand over to Martina from Climax Community, who will introduce the Climate Essentials tool for calculating your business's footprint. And that will then bring us back round to the Q&A at the end, where I hope there'll be lots of questions by that point in the chat window. So a busy 80 minutes ahead, as I promised. Without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Councillor Deirdre Costigan and hand over to you for the Ealing perspective.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew, for that. Really appreciate being here today and being invited to attend this event, which Ealing is, partnering with West London Business and also the Race for Change campaign in order to bring businesses together to discuss what can be done practically to address climate change. Because I think sometimes, you see all this stuff in the news, don't you? And this COP26 we see all over the place, but it's not always clear what that means practically for all of us in Ealing. So I'm really hoping that today is going to give us those answers, and it's just great to have so many local business people here who are interested in this agenda and want to find out what they can do. And I'm particularly interested in hearing from Ivor about what's been happening practically on the ground in some of our businesses. So Ealing did declare a climate emergency in 2019, and as part of that we want to reduce our carbon emissions to zero by 2030. We have recently had a change of leadership in the council, so I've been in this role only for a couple of weeks, I'm afraid, but I'm picking it up. And as part of that change of leadership, we're actually wanting to focus much more on tackling climate change. And rather than it being sort of, something on a list of priorities, we now want it to be it's one of our top priorities, our top 3 priorities. And we want it to be part of everything we do. It's cross-cutting across the council. And also our role is not just about the council, of course, it's across the whole of the Ealing community. And as part of our strategy, we're looking at reducing emissions across Ealing. And those emissions come from about a third come from business and industry and commerce. So we have to use our influencing, I guess, and working with you as partners to try and reduce emissions there. We can do work, and we are doing work on reducing our own emissions as a council, and that is part of our climate emergency plan, but we want to work with you in order to have an impact on that third of emissions, and we do produce 1.1 million tonnes of CO2 annually, so we want to try and work with you to reduce that. So what we've done ourselves, as I say, we know we have to lead by example. We are committed to energy efficiency and renewable energy generation, and we've also developed a workplace travel plan where we've set ourselves a goal of 80% of staff travelling to work by active travel or public transport in the coming years. And we've had over 500 bicycles purchased through our Cycle to Work scheme, which has contributed to the health of our staff and local air quality. So that's sort of a practical example of what we as a council have done in order to reduce our emissions. But there is still a lot of work to do, and I think it is a challenging target to get to 2030 with zero emissions. And like I say, we want to work with all of you to achieve that. I mean, for me, I'm a Labour councillor, and I come from like a perspective of equality. And for me, climate action is about social justice. In the global south, we have some of the poorest people in the world who are facing the worst aspects of the impact of climate change, such as like famine, flood, desertification, drought. But as well as that, of course, in our own country, you've got flooding in places like Boscombe, which affects businesses. So we can see how that happens as well and how it has an impact here. But it is an issue for me of social justice. And I guess in terms of like businesses, for you guys, as well as probably, I'm sure a lot of you would have that same social justice perspective that I have, because I don't think all business people are capitalist, expletive deleted. I think you care about the world that you work in and you care about your consumers. But I think there's also, isn't there, an important point around the business case for tackling climate change locally. And so many consumers now are much more ethical consumers, and they actually make these decisions in much more thoughtful ways than they might have in the past. And I'm expecting that there is a lot of businesses out there who are really keen to do this work and really want to work with us, but perhaps don't know where to start and don't know what they should be focusing on. Because like I say, sometimes it's a bit theoretical. So I really hope that today is going to be a day where we can learn about practical steps that local businesses can take, whether it's about your, reducing your packaging and your refuse and recycling, looking at your energy. I hope there's going to be lots of different ideas that we can take away from today. We ourselves would be really, really delighted if any of you had ideas that you thought the council could help run with, and you can contact our climate action team. Their email address is really easy. It's just climateaction@ealing.gov.uk. That's gov.uk. So we will be creating some resources ourselves for businesses that you'll be able to use to get involved in reducing your carbon footprint. But if you have got ideas that maybe what's worked with your organisation, then do please get in contact with us. So just finally to say again, thank you so much for West London Business and Race to Zero for today, and I'm really looking forward to it. I hope everybody enjoys it, and I will revert back to Andrew. Thank you.
Councillor Costigan, thank you so much for setting the scene, and interesting, encouraging to hear that climate change action is now in some of the top priorities of the new leadership of the council, that your door is clearly open to ideas from the business community. And I think the point you made around the social justice dimension to all of this is actually going to come through very strongly in the presentation of our next speaker, Jessica, from the UN Global Compact Network, and the framework that so many businesses are now signing up to, that includes that social bit of the jigsaw. So without further ado, I'm going to pass straight over to Jessica to tell us more about the SDGs, which I'm conscious may be new to some delegates on today's call. Jessica.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, my name is Jessica, and I work at the UN Global Compact Network UK, and my role there is to support businesses to drive sustainability and really create the world we want. So delighted to join you here to talk about this agenda. So a little bit about us. We are the UN Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. So we have over 13,000 companies all over the world who've made the commitment to our 10 principles to support sustainability. And these universal principles are derived from UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labour, environment and anti-corruption. So I work in the UK network, and our role is to support all of those UK-based members to do three things, really: to operationalise those 10 principles, to report annually on their progress, and to support the wider UN development agenda. And that wider UN development agenda is best represented today by the Sustainable Development Goals. So what are they? You may hear them being called the SDGs or the global goals, but these Sustainable Development Goals were passed in 2015, and they set out 17 goals for the world to achieve by 2030. The goals are very closely interlinked, but the idea is that together they will bring about the future that we want. So fighting those inequalities, tackling climate change, and creating a better world. So they're really, you can see they're really diverse in the types of things that they're trying to achieve. You've got environmental things there, like protecting life below water and taking climate action. Some more social things like eliminating poverty and hunger and achieving gender equality. And some more economic things in there as well, you know, a goal 8 there, which is around decent work and economic growth. So beneath these 17 goals sit 169 targets and then 232 indicators that help us measure our progress against them. And this 2030 agenda was agreed by all UN member states after, I think, one of the largest consultations they ever did. There was literally tens of thousands of stakeholders that participated. And the goals therefore apply to all countries. So I guess while it was governments that made the commitment to this, the goals will require support from all members of the community of society and particularly, I think, the business community. So the problem is, after 5 years, the world has not been delivering on these goals at this pace or the scale that is needed. And there's some quite bleak stats there on the slide. And we're now seeing the impact of COVID-19 intertwined with some of these long-standing social and economic inequalities. I think there was a real missed opportunity that if we'd have been working on this agenda more before the pandemic, we would have been better equipped to deal with it. So everything that this agenda looking to achieve, things like more universal access to healthcare, more inclusive and sustainable societies, you know, better protections in the informal economy, more resilient businesses, are all things that would have left us in a better position when we were hit by COVID-19. So let's go on to the next slide, I think. The good news is that we're seeing a lot of engagement by businesses across the SDGs. But there's a critical performance gap between the action that businesses are taking and the global and societal needs that are defined by those goals. So globally, 39% of companies have said that think they've got targets that are sufficiently ambitious or science-based. So that means, for example, a business may be setting targets to reduce their carbon emissions. But those targets that they're actually trying to achieve aren't sufficient enough to be able to limit global temperatures to a safe amount. So that's what's happening globally. Let's go on to the next slide and look what's happening at the national and the local level. Specifically in the UK, we have a lot of work to do. On the left side here, you can see a study that was done in 2018 and found that 143 targets, so out of those 169, 143 of them were relevant to the UK, but we're only making good progress on 24% of those. In 2019, the government did this report you can see in the middle of the slide there, the Voluntary National Review of Progress Towards the Goals, and took a really deep dive into each individual SDG and looked at the next steps that we need to be doing to achieving them. And there's some updated figures on the ONS website if you're interested in looking a little bit more up to date on how we're performing on each of those goals. So but we've got this mandate from the national government, and now we're seeing that trickling down to the local government. So here in London, just earlier this year, the city produced a report looking at how we're contributing to the SDGs and setting out 5 key recommendations for how we can advance them. And crucially, built into those recommendations is the need, or the urgent need, I should say, to use this agenda to build back better and to help us recover stronger from the pandemic. And of course, business is going to be such a huge part in London delivering this. So we know that the city needs business to help deliver on this agenda, but let's look at the flip side and look at what the benefits are to you. There is a tremendous opportunity in it and a huge financial benefit. So there was a robust analysis done just after the goals were passed in 2015, which looked at just a few of the key sectors that would be impacted in it, and it found that there was a potential for $12 trillion of new business value every year by supporting this agenda. So huge financial benefit. We look at the macro level, which is the first few bullet points there on that slide. Everything that the SDGs are attaining for, so better educated and more productive workforce, economic and political stability, more fair and just societies, these things are all good for business. If we look at the micro level, and Deirdre has touched on some of these already, engaging with this agenda makes a business more attractive for investors and customers. And what we're seeing now is that more and more people are demanding or expecting businesses to be able to demonstrate their purpose beyond profit. And that's the same in the people that you are hiring to work with you as well. Of course, it helps improve management of the supply chain, which can help you save money and resources, helps you build that trust and accountability, and share a global language. So by engaging with the SDGs and actually showing your commitment to them, helps you share that language of sustainability that then allows you to demonstrate to your stakeholders what you're doing on this agenda. And I suppose my last point, really, going back to COVID-19, I mentioned the missed opportunity in us not making more progress towards the goals and how that would have left us better prepared for the pandemic. And that applies to businesses as well. So aligning your strategies with the Sustainable Development Goals is the best way that you can create a resilient, strong and sustainable business. And there are a number of free tools and resources to understand the SDGs better and to really look at how you can align with them, communicate with them and explore your own impacts. And if you're interested, then there's loads of free tools on our website, and I can put the link in the chat later for anyone that wants to know. Today, though, we're just focusing on one of those goals, so SDG 13, climate action. So let's look at this, why this goal in particular. Climate action essentially is one of the SDGs where businesses of any size can have the biggest impact. And I'm not just talking about you having the greatest impact on the environment and the society, but it's also about you future-proofing your business and being able to reap the benefits, so having the biggest positive impact in what your business is going to be doing going forward. So businesses, I guess, that look to use and manage resources more efficiently can tangibly reduce operating costs and increase profitability. And that's something we mentioned when I was talking about management of the supply chain. I've got a bullet point there on the slide about future-proofing your business, and it's really about getting ahead of the changes that are coming, that we're going to be anticipating. I think government has set targets for the UK to transition to net zero. And I guess for an example of that, really, by 2030, you won't be able to buy new petrol and diesel cars and vans in the UK. So I guess by trying to get ahead of that agenda and anticipating the changes that are coming, you can save yourself some of those costs that are going to come down the line. So if you're looking at replacing some of your vehicles or buying new ones, changing your fleet, then making that switch to zero emission vehicles means that you're going to be able to get ahead of this agenda, future-proof your business and reap some of those benefits and incentives that are already coming forward now. And investors are looking at how you're doing this. So they're looking at how you're going to be able to manage those business risks, how you're going to manage disruptions and changes to the supply chain, changes in legislation. But they're also looking at how you're going to be responding to the shift in demand. And particularly when we think about the climate, there is a huge demand from the public for the businesses to be engaging with this. A couple of years ago, we had really popular climate strikes. We had a lot of people demanding that their cities or even the organisations that they work for demand a climate emergency or declare a climate emergency. And these people are not just your investors, they might not even be your suppliers or the people that then work with you, but they're also your customers and your clients. And I think this is particularly high on our agenda at the moment because this year the UK will be hosting the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties. Next slide, please. So what is this? Well, in November, world leaders are going to be coming to Glasgow, and they're going to be looking to set ambitious targets for reducing emissions. So that means that I guess all eyes will be on the UK, but the UK particularly is looking to take a leading role in those conversations, which means that the government is going to be looking at business to take a leading role in reducing emissions. So we're expecting to see a lot of support and incentives, but also a lot of requirements from government. Lots of demands from your customers, and I guess also, you know, your competitors might already be acting on this. So I think lots of pressures on businesses to start engaging with this, but I guess it's not all doom and gloom. I think by the very act of being here, you've made that first step in wanting to take actions towards the climate, and even wanting to lead the way. So I guess the big question is, what can you do about this? The Race to Zero campaign is about getting your emissions down to net zero, which means that you're not putting any more emissions into the atmosphere than you're taking out. And the UK government is putting a lot of resources into this. So on the left is a screenshot of the government's SME Climate Hub, which is full of resources, ideas and guidance to help you cut your emissions. Just by taking the first step to make your own climate commitments will then open the door to these tools and some of the incentives that they're offering, which can then help you meet that commitment. And I think it's Barney or Jane will be talking a little bit more about this when they introduce the West London Business Race to Zero toolkit. Just to say that the UN Global Compact Network UK is also going to be partnering up with the government to host a 1-hour webinar to take a really deep dive into COP26 and what it's all about, explore some of those terms that I've mentioned, things like net zero, and also some of these practical steps. But for my final slide, I just wanted to return to this broader sustainability agenda and take a look at where climate action fits within it. The truth is, we can't achieve any of these other goals that protect the environment or reduce inequalities or lift people out of poverty if we don't take urgent action on the climate. And I've got some animation on this slide. And the SDGs that are kind of left here on this slide are the SDGs which business can have a direct positive impact on just by engaging on SDG 13. So some examples, I guess, by looking at your supply chain to help reduce your emissions, you're impacting goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. By encouraging your staff to take active transport to work, that's contributing towards goal 3, good health and well-being. Looking at renewable energy is goal 7, working with your local council on some of their plans and initiatives, that's goal 11, offsetting carbon that you can't reduce goes towards goal 15, and so on. And of course, that's just to say that's at the direct level. So if you then consider the knock-on impacts nationally or even globally, you can consider how you taking climate action is then going to be impacting all of these other goals. So I hope that set the scene a little bit. I'll now hand over to Andrew and the rest of our speakers who are going to take a dive into the practical action that you can take to then deliver this agenda.
Thank you so much, Jessica. As I promised, Councillor Costigan, you made that link for us, really kind of drawing out that the interconnectedness of all the UN SDGs and how if we use climate action as an entry point, we end up, of course, delivering an awful lot more wider benefits, and also unpacking COP26 for us, the conference that may or may not happen in person in Glasgow. Of course, there are strong arguments that perhaps not having everyone jump on aeroplanes and meeting online might be a better way of reducing our carbon footprint, but we shall see what unfolds in practice later in the year. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Ivor Tucker of the Oak Network, who is going to start bringing this alive at a practical level. What is it that we can all be doing here and now to reduce our carbon footprint? So welcome, Ivor.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks very much. So I've got a presentation to share. Rowan, do I just
go for it? You've got the powers as co-host to share your presentation using the share screen option.
Can you see that?
The icon at the bottom of the screen, I think, usually for the share screen.
There's a green icon at the bottom, Ivor. It should say share screen.
Yeah. Hang on a second. Okay, there we go.
And then just click slideshow, and from the start, there you go. Perfect.
Brilliant.
Right. So I represent two companies, which I'll talk about here. One is the Oak Network, which is an early stage business that aims to help SME businesses to improve their energy efficiency, particularly focusing on reduction and improvement of processes that reduce wastage and therefore will reduce costs and efficiencies. Emissions. At the moment, most SME businesses get one piece of data every month about their energy consumption, which is their electricity or gas bill, and it gives them zero insights. And they have to pay it because if they don't pay it, they don't have any energy. But it doesn't give them any information as to what they can do to improve their situation. So what Oak does is that we provide regular reports based on actual consumption data that we gather from each site, which shows consumption patterns. And that will allow us over a period of time, once we've collected data over several months, to generate insights and recommendations about where there are areas of overconsumption, particularly potentially inefficiencies, and how consumption can be reduced without impacting on the business. It's very affordable as far as the SME is concerned. Typically, the cost would be between 5 to 10% of the annual electricity bill before you get started, and the estimated savings to be generated will range anywhere from 10 to 40% within 12 months. The way it works is that Oak installs proprietary technology next to the incoming electricity feed into the site, so basically next to the electricity meter. That collects consumption data every 10 seconds, which is transmitted via the cloud to the Oak machine learning platform, which collects the data and over a period of time, on a weekly, then monthly, and then further beyond that, will analyze that data to identify patterns of usage. From that analysis, we're then able to provide insights and recommendations to either improve behavior. It can also identify areas where there might be things. For example, one client we've got, they're spending about 25% of their total electricity consumption is when the business is closed. So they didn't know that before. They're now in a position to investigate what appliances, what things are actually generating electricity when nobody's there, and work out what they can do to shut that down or cut it down. And the intention is after a 12-month journey, when you have the full annual energy DNA, so to speak, of the business, Oak is then in a position to provide detailed recommendations to help the business develop a long-term decarbonization plan. And the aim is to support the business to become net zero operation within an agreed period of time based on the specifics of that particular business. And that obviously fits in with all the stuff that, that the other speakers have been talking about this afternoon. There is a very quick case study of a hospitality site that was done. This was actually done just before COVID hit, where it's a nightclub and a bar. As you can see, the system actually allows for monitoring of specific individual appliances as well as the overall patterns of usage. And the consumption before was a weekly cost of around £62, and you can see the energy pattern there. Once we've done our analysis after a couple of months, you can see based on this, you've got a much more individual pattern on a daily basis, particularly cutting down on some of the costs when the business is closed. And that generated a saving for them of £32 or 52% week on week. So that kind of thing is obviously an example of one particular site, but that's the kind of insights that we would hope to provide to companies. What the Oak platform currently does is it provides these various different facilities, so energy data collection, insights about where their consumption is, comparisons month on month, particularly areas when costs at different times of day, so when the business is closed, when it's open, where your peaks and troughs of usage are. And it's designed to give management information to a business owner so that they can at least make informed decisions as to how they wish to proceed and what they can do to try and reduce consumption and become more green. In the future, areas that we're working on, which will develop over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, as we get more clients, we're developing clustering. So the idea is to study different customers, and so that once we have a certain number of customers of a given, say, restaurant of a particular size, we can then go to another restaurant and say, if you look like this, you can expect to make savings of that. So these are the various different types of things, and the whole idea is that over time, collecting more and more data from more and more customers, the community development and the community insights will improve, and ideally over from a borough basis, the more companies within a given borough will then be able to share the analysis and insights of all the local businesses and collectively make a bigger contribution. Future business offerings would be a live interactive dashboard, which is one of the things we're currently building. Potential savings are going to be significant, and the idea is that year on year, each company will improve, and then ultimately the whole process is to reduce consumption, reduce emissions, and go green. The second hat that I wear is an organization called Hope Sustainability, which is a social enterprise. It works very closely with the Oak Network, and it's focusing on schools and school children to try and get them engaged with the whole green agenda and getting them to understand what climate action is all about. So Hopes is a not-for-profit. It is a social enterprise, as I mentioned, and its mission is to focus on practical engagement with sustainability in schools on a weekly, monthly, and termly basis. So there are lots of good things going on from time to time in schools. You might have a climate week or a science week or whatever, but the reality is that kids need to start to focus on sustainability as part of their everyday lives. So the idea is to take pupils over a 10-year journey from sort of mid-primary to the end of their secondary school education. And the intention is that by the time they leave secondary school, they're going to be environmentally aware young adults who understand the complexities of climate change, that it's not just a black and white situation. For example, you can't just say, well, stop flying, and that's going to reduce emissions, because the implications are that for communities that depend on tourism for their own sustainability and survival, if tourists don't fly there, that's revenue that they don't have, and then that impacts on how they sustain their own communities. So there are lots of trade-offs, there are lots of obstacles, but the most important thing is that it's really important for school kids to understand that there is hope, which is why we've named ourselves Hope Sustainability. And the intention is that really today is probably one of the best times to be a young child or an early adult, because there are so many opportunities in the green economy that affect how we're going to do things, and kids can learn and understand how they can make individual contributions on an individual, family, and a community basis. So what we do is, from an operations perspective, a school is just like any other SME, in as much as it consumes energy, and the business management generally have very little insight into what that consumption means. So we provide the Oak energy sensor technology to the schools to help them reduce their energy bills and reduce their emissions. But then the next step is to take that data and work with the teachers and the kids to undertake projects that allow them to look at how the data can be used. And by making sure that it's local and practical, the kids can get involved in projects, for example, run competitions between classes to see who can make the most reduction in their particular classroom, and the data, the sensors, will be able to monitor and track that. Another school we're working with, the year 8 class, is doing a term activity on weather. So they're going to be measuring how outside temperature impacts on the consumption of electricity within the school. And they will track the temperature, and then they can analyze that and match it against the daily data consumption and see what sort of patterns and correlation there may be. Hope's position is that we want to deliver the resources to our schools at no cost because of the pressures that school budgets are under. So part of the process that we're looking to do to ensure that we can make this work is to get community engagement, corporate engagement, and participation from the local community to help schools get the sort of quality of education. So we currently are piloting our project with 6 schools in London, one of which is in Ealing, Allenby Primary School. And the intention is to use this current academic term to establish the base data and systems and make sure that everything's working. And then at the end of the term is to start looking at rolling this out to more schools, both across London and in due course nationally across the UK, and also have the resources and information available to schools anywhere in the world via an online platform. We currently, in addition to the 6 pilot schools, we have a waiting list of 35 schools that are interested and looking to get involved. The main constraint there is access to funding to install the technology and resources in those schools. And we're also starting to talk to a number of multi-academy trusts that are also interested in engaging, and some are within in Ealing, and some have either regional or national presences. One of the other ideas that we're exploring is working with schools and to get community fundraising. So for those businesses or individuals, if you have families that your kids are at schools and you want them to have this kind of engagement, please contact us, because we'd love to talk to you about potentially trying to do some school community fundraising activities so that we can generate the funds to cover the cost of the installation of the kit in your school. So this is a quote from Daniel Bishop, who's the head teacher of Allenby, who's been working with us for the last year and a half on putting the whole program together. Allenby is an extraordinary school. It's a single form primary school, but if any of you are interested in contacting Daniel to find out what they're doing, he and his staff are totally engaged with developing the whole climate action at the school. And the idea, as he says, is to embed sustainability into all the activities at the school every day, whether it be in the science classes, in geography, in history, in English, in art. There is always an element about sustainability that can be covered in there. From a business perspective, these are two quotes from a business person who's involved, one a very strong sustainability advocate and an investor, an impact investor. And the second one is the Greenhouse Accelerator Program. Hopes has recently been accepted as one of the first cohort of the Greenhouse, which is an initiative between Imperial College London and the Royal Institution. And they've established the Centre for Climate Change Innovation in central London. And we're very happy to be part of that and helping to ensure that the dissemination of green ideas to schools from within these new entrepreneurial businesses that are being fostered by the Accelerator Program. So that's all I have. Those are our details. Barney and WLB will obviously have those details as well. So I'm very happy to take any questions from anybody, but please do get in touch if you're interested to find out more. We believe that this is a fantastic opportunity for businesses at a very low cost to become engaged in taking positive action as a first step to start getting management information about your electricity consumption and seeing how you can actually make an impact for yourselves and the broader community.
Ivor, thank you so much for that overview, not just of the Oak Network, but also Hope Sustainability, the sort of sister non-profit organisation, perhaps, of Oak Network. Really exciting to see how the two organisations are sort of working side by side, and that you're now in a pilot sort of mode with the programme sort of rolling out into secondary schools, primary schools in West London and beyond. We're starting to get some questions through, but I'm going to hold those back largely, I think, till the end. I did have one question of clarification for you, and that was sort of going back to the Oak Network offer. If I was, let's say, a local hospitality business, and imagining a lot of hospitality settings, you might have refrigerators, for example, that could be chewing up your electricity, but you're not too sure. Does the monitoring equipment just go in at the sort of core meter, or would you also sometimes be monitoring individual devices to understand where the consumption lies? How does it work?
The initial installation is at the main meter to get the pattern of usage over the business in the first instance, but part of the sensors technology that we have, we can monitor fuse boards, so we can monitor lighting, we can monitor air conditioning, we can monitor fridges. There will be mechanisms for us to go down to individual granularity on individual fridges as well. So we've got, and some of them are pretty obvious. One of our sites, for example, was a restaurant where the chef would come in at 9 in the morning and switch on all the hot plates, but the first customers only arrived at 12:30. So that usage of electricity for 3.5 hours was costing the business £5,000 a year. So that when the business owner, actually, or the restaurant owner, discovered that, he suddenly made sure that his chef only switched the heaters on at 12 or when the first customers arrived. So there are often lots of little things that we can pick up, but then some of the stuff, the overall intention is to start looking at more granularity as we get more understanding of each individual business's profile. And
as you say, sometimes it can be very obvious and visible, and sometimes an anomaly might require more investigation, I suppose.
Yeah. So one of our schools, for example, at Allenby, they spend about £10 a day when the school is closed. So £10 a day isn't that much, but it's £3,500 a year. Now, so that's an insight we can give to the head teacher and say, there may be very good reasons why you are consuming that energy, but basically there's nobody in the school overnight. So maybe people aren't switching off computers or whatever it is. And it's giving the information that's the important part. It's then up to each individual business owner or management to decide what they're going to implement, but it gives them the visibility which they currently don't have.
Thank you. I know, very helpful. Well, we're now going to sort of stay pretty practical as we're going to be looking more at the tools that are now available for local businesses to take off the shelf, tools that might well in fact sit alongside investing in systems like the Oak Network platform. And for that, I think we're joined by Barney and or Jane from the WLB team to talk us through Race to Zero West London and what's available right now. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to our speakers today. And as we've heard over the past 45 minutes or so, there's a real clear support for delivering this sustainable agenda on a kind of international, national and local level. But it's also great to see that this is really cross-generational, and also that there's a big kind of community aspect to that as well. But as we've heard over the last 45 minutes or so, there's a long way to go to reaching these kind of ambitious goals and what we want to achieve. So the stakes really are high, which is why we talk about the race to zero. The objective of Race to Zero is to build momentum around the shift to a decarbonised economy ahead of COP26, where governments must strengthen their contributions to the Paris Agreement. At West London Business, we work with the business community, academia, incubators and accelerators, think tanks and non-for-profits, as well as government and public body organisations to strengthen the West London supply chain with the aim of making it as sustainable and climate resilient as possible. And this really brings the knock-on of impacts of that Jessica detailed earlier. So here's a real snapshot of some of our programs which we've been delivering over the course of the past couple of years, and this really aligns and brings together our whole kind of sustainable agenda moving towards COP26 in November. So we do this by focusing on innovation in clean tech, by helping sustainable organisations grow and flourish through the Better Futures programme. We link people together to support innovation in the aviation industry through our London West Innovation District, which is the genesis of the Innovation District and was birthed through our Blue Sky Conference, which as we see sort of West London as a Silicon Valley of aviation and look towards those Jet Zero targets to make and help other aviation hubs move towards those Jet Zero targets. We've launched Better Futures Plus to help businesses pledging to reach net zero by 2030 develop their sustainability strategy. And within all of these programs and this practical action, we're really developing case studies to inspire others to act. As a business, as we've heard, getting ahead of this agenda is really crucial, and the business case is stronger than ever. So becoming a climate leader within your industry is going to have a real positive impact for your business, the environment, and your stakeholders, as well as your consumers. Next slide, please. Achieving net zero is recognised as a kind of primary goal of climate change mitigation at the global level. So in 2019, the UK became the first major economy to legislate and commit to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This ambitious target will inform the future direction of government policy over the coming decades and has real major implications for business. So working with our partners, our mission is really to turn momentum of the sustainability agenda and the programmes we've touched upon today into practical local action across West London. We want to inspire business ambition to reach the goals, enable practical action and shape a responsible business environment. So how do you do this as a business? So to get started, we've formulated a Race to Zero campaign where you can see the UN Global Compact's free 30-minute workshops, which help you to understand some of the key terminology and the dialogue around this agenda. There's some sector-focused workshops, which really dials into your sector and how you can achieve this through within the kind of field that you work in, to like I say, become pioneers within your industry and really lead the way on this agenda. We also offer a basic carbon footprint calculator free of charge to really get you started and get an understanding of what your carbon footprint is in terms of that scope 1, 2, and 3, and then by having this holistic picture, you can really start to make your way in reducing these carbon emissions. And this is really where the tools come in. So we have a sustainability tools guide, which will provide you with the tools to get started on your journey, with information on wider policy guidelines, sector-specific tools, so you can track and reduce your emissions to fit your business and stakeholder needs. And this is designed to signpost tools to support you in measuring and reducing your carbon footprint and making you aware of the tools that are there to help build awareness of your footprint. The guide includes some tools that take a more holistic view of environmental sustainability, as well as tools that incorporate social and economic value creation. An example of this is through our built environment section. The operation of buildings alone represent around 40% of energy use in many developed economies. So as we've heard from Ivor before, reducing energy use and transitioning towards zero greenhouse emissions in the built environment is therefore going to be critical as your business moves forward. And by doing this, you can also really save money and assess the environmental performance of your buildings. There are some tools in there to measure your product lifecycle analysis. So these tools assist with sustainability decision making from a product or project level. They're suitable for businesses to understand their performance and impacts and really discover hotspots in this process and help stakeholders make better informed decisions. If you want to take a deeper dive into your business and get some expert knowledge, you can use our Sustainable Consultancies directory, which offers a wide range of sustainability consultants carefully selected by ourselves across a variety of specialist sectors who can help your business on its transition to net zero. So moving on. Sorry, next slide, please, Rohan. There we go. So here we can see our Race to Zero map, and these really showcase the businesses who've put out their ambitions to go to net zero by 2030, or in some cases 2050. At the Race to Zero launch, there was an interesting report that showed that over half of the global GDP measured in terms of the actors who make up the global GDP have committed to or are thinking about setting a net zero target. There are two sides to setting your net zero targets. Corporates can register through the SBTIs, where over 1,000 businesses around the world are working with the SBTIs, that's the Science-Based Targets Initiatives, to reduce their emissions in line with the climate science. There on the map you can see are the blue and pink, green and pink markers. So we really encourage you to take these steps and so we can celebrate the work that you're doing on our West London map. So from an SME's perspective, the BEIS is encouraging all SMEs to make the following commitments by completing a short form: to halve your greenhouse gas emissions before 2030, achieve net zero emissions before 2050, and disclose your progress on a yearly basis. But you're not alone on this. Along the way, you will unlock incentives and benefits that will make the journey well worth it. And through the tools specified by ourselves, we really think that these goals are achievable. The movement is gathering extraordinary momentum, and here at West London Business, we encourage working with our partners to inspire business ambition to reach these global goals, enable practical action, and shape a responsible business environment across our sub-region and also now London-wide. Next slide, please, Rohan. So to take a more of a deeper dive into some of the programs that we're working with, our Best Futures program, which is now in our 4th year, has helped over 150 businesses alongside our delivery partners, Imperial College, Imperial Consultants, the GLA and Sustainable Workplaces, which really is looking to make London a beacon of clean tech businesses who are striving to lead the way in innovation for London. These case studies are going to be crucial to advancing the green agenda, and we encourage you to explore our Better Futures directory to discover more fantastic clean tech businesses which can help you on both a personal and business level to make your business more sustainable. And building on the success of the Better Futures programme, we're in the middle of launching our Better Futures Plus programme, which is designed to help 12 businesses in London understand their environmental impacts and design a strategy to reach net zero by 2030. We have selected 12 businesses across 4 sectors of film, creative industries, food and hospitality, and each business will use their green innovation vouchers to gain bespoke sustainability advice and will take part in the Leonardo Centre's Executive Leadership Programme as part of the Imperial Business School. By doing this, we're really creating those case studies and creating a launch pad for these businesses to not only help their business towards net zero, but also pave the way for other businesses in their industry to follow suit. Each business has undertaken a carbon auditing process, which is done by our partners at Climate Essentials, and it's a good time for me to kind of hand over to Martina, who will show you how that works and how it can really be useful for your business.
Perfect. Thank you, Barney, and thank you, West London Business, for the invitation to this webinar. My name is Martina Coleman, and I work as a climate change engineer for Climate Community. We are helping the 12 businesses in the cohort from Better Future Plus program to establish a baseline for the carbon footprint and give them recommendations on how to reduce it. A bit more about Climate Community. We are a young organization. I'm currently in the offices right now after 8 months of working from home, and lovely office, but unfortunately internet connection is not quite stable today, so apologize if suddenly I log off. It's not intentional at all. We often hear the discussion of who is responsible for global warming and who needs to do something to limit climate change below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And at Climate Community, we believe that everyone can do their part. So whether you are a person, part of a household, whether you are a small, a micro, or a medium enterprise, and even if you're a local authority, we believe that everyone can do their part to fight climate change. And also we believe in the powers of communities and that every little action can help and we can catalyze climate action. So to help everyone with this carbon reduction journey, we have developed Climate Essential, which is basically your one-stop tool for climate action. So as I said before, whether you're a person, a business, or a local authority, you can access our climate reduction plan. For people and for households, we have a simple carbon calculation, which is engaging, is very simple, and is very fast to complete. And for local authorities, we provide carbon data analytics of their ecosystem. So a local authority can see where are carbon emissions coming from different neighborhoods, from different villages, and also from different business sectors and sizes. But what I'm going to show you today is how to use Climate Essentials when you want to measure the carbon footprint for your business. Obviously, first, we're going to ask you some basic questions about your business. This is going to help us create a profile and tailor the carbon questions that we're going to ask you at a later stage. You're going to see the estimation button quite a bit across our carbon calculator because we know that sometimes it's very difficult or it's not the information to go through a carbon assessment is not really easily available for you. And we also, lastly, we're going to ask you about the period for which you want to create your carbon footprint. Let's select 2020 here. And what we have done with Climate Essentials is divide the carbon emissions calculations into 4 different sectors that we believe contribute the most to an organizational carbon footprint. We know that lots of businesses are interested in measuring the carbon footprint. In fact, we know that 78% of businesses in the UK want to go into the carbon reduction journey, but sometimes they lack time, they lack the knowledge, they don't have sustainability analysts within their ranks to go through these carbon calculations. So with these estimation buttons and the way we ask you for these questions, we believe we make it really engaging for any business to go and to get their carbon footprints. So firstly, we're going to ask you about your electricity consumption. You can answer this question in pounds, in kilowatt hours, or if you don't have that information, we can use the estimate button and we're going to get the carbon emissions for you. Then we ask you the same for gas bill, and we know some businesses get the natural gas from a green gas provider. So if they click on here, the carbon emissions are going to be amended accordingly. Then we move to transport emissions, where we ask you about the mileage of different type of cars that you may have in your businesses. So for example, if you have a hybrid car, you can select the numbers of cars that you have, the total mileage for this car, and then the carbon emissions are going to be completed accordingly. And this is the same for delivery vehicles. We're going to ask you about the mileage for diesel cars, for petrol cars, and for heavier vehicles that you may have in your business operations. The other option that we need to take into account when we try to measure the transport emissions that are coming from businesses is employee commuting. We know that 2020 was a special year and some people may be working from home and you may not have a lot of employees flying, but on normal circumstances, actually employee commuting is quite a big source of emissions. So it's not that easy, it's not that difficult to calculate them. So if you have the time, and if you want to add a bit more accuracy when it comes to your scope 3, your indirect emissions, transport employee commuting is one way of doing so. And for me, it's always special if you try to engage with your employees. One of the reasons business want to improve their green credentials is pressures from their employees to work in a greener workplace. So by engaging with them and trying to find out their employee commuting is a great way to improve your employees' green credentials. The second to last section that we have on climate essentials is products and services emissions. These are scope 3 emissions, and we know that some businesses, especially when they are on the earlier stages of their carbon reduction journey, they usually don't measure it, but we have an easy way of starting thinking about scope 3 emissions. So we ask you about your water usage. Again, it can be in pounds, it can be in cubic meters, or if you're not sure, you can press estimate and we're going to get that information for you. Then on your business, you may provide food and drinks for your employees, so you can easily put the expenditure here, and then we can calculate the carbon emissions. If you provide a vegan or vegetarian diet, then the carbon emissions are going to go down substantially. We also ask you about expenditure in some different types of products, for example, electronic, stationery, and furniture. You may want to add a bit more details to try to understand more where your scope 3 emissions are coming from. So if you're going to on the screen, we're going to ask you about expenditures on accounting services, marketing services, pension, and legal services as well, and a bit more detail into other products that you may buy for your businesses. What we found it was quite relevant for these days is to add a section for home working emissions, because we know that you may have some employees working from home, like me until today, and that makes the emissions that were coming from the offices, which were scope 1, electricity and gas, and scope 2, are moving now to scope 3. So that is something that you need to take into account. So based on the number of hours, the numbers of employees, and how often they work from home, we can easily estimate the office equipment emissions. These are laptops, printers, and routers. We can also estimate the heating and the cooling emissions for your businesses. And lastly, we provide a way to measure or estimate your waste emissions. We know that waste is sometimes tricky when you try to account for it, because you don't really know how many tons or how many kilos of general recyclable or food waste you produce in the business. So again, if you click on estimate, we're going to provide you an estimation based on your business profile. But if you want to add more detail, we can go, for example, to the recyclable waste calculator. You can select the type of bins that you have in your business and how often you empty that business on an average week. And based on this profile, we can estimate the waste emissions that are coming from recyclables. Once you have gone through a carbon calculation, you are going to access your dashboard, your business dashboard. And then we're going to give you the carbon footprint for the selected period of time. And then we're going to benchmark your carbon footprint with business in the same sector and similar size. We also provide a carbon footprint breakdown by scopes. This is extremely important if you want to start publishing or measuring your carbon emissions with the GHG protocol. Scope 1 simply is all the fuels that you use for your business, natural gas, petrol and diesel for your vehicles. Scope 2 is electricity mostly, and that you use for your offices, and if you use electric vehicles. And then Scope 3 are all the emissions that are coming outside your business operations. This is obviously, if you go downstream, is use of the products and waste, and if we go upstream, is the suppliers. And in this case, home working, if you have employees working from home. We also provide a breakdown into the same sectors as we use in the carbon calculator. On the dashboard, you can actually see how much carbon emissions the businesses in our community have pledged to reduce. Because as I said, in Climex community, we believe that every little thing helps when it comes to limit global warming below 1.5 degrees. And by seeing what everyone else is doing, we can actually catalyze climate action. And lastly, on Climate Essentials, you're going to access your reduction plans, where we're going to give you easy recommendations on what you can do in your business to start reducing your carbon emissions. Some of these recommendations you may have done already, especially because some are very easy to implement, for example, switching to LED lighting. So if you have done some of this stuff already, just click on them, and then they are not going to appear later on the carbon reduction plan. Once you access the carbon reduction plan, you're going to see your carbon emissions breakdown into the same sectors as we use in the carbon calculator, your original carbon footprint and how much you have pledged to reduce in these different sectors. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see your progress. On this case, 34% of the emissions have been pledged to reduce across different sectors. So let's say we want to see what we can do to reduce our transport emissions. We're going to go here. And then we can see what happens when you decide as a business to electrify your diesel cars or your petrol cars. You can even implement some cycle to work scheme for your employees, and the emissions scope 3 are going to go down accordingly. And then we can select greener choices of transport to reduce domestic flight. For example, we want to switch domestic flight for a train trip, or a short haul for a train trip, or maybe even reducing your long flights. And then you can also switch to more efficient fuels when it comes to heavier or delivery vehicles. Based on this, we can see how the transport emissions have started to come down. And this is the same when you want to go, for example, to waste reduction, to energy and products and services. I think that is it from my part. We are always looking for businesses who want to join and try our platform. So I'm going to write my email right now on the Zoom call, but please get in touch with me if you want to try the platform or if you have any ideas on how we can make Climate Essentials more relevant for your business. Thank you.
Martina, thank you so much. And as I've said before, it's great to see how the tool keeps evolving and how ready it is really for practical use. And you've, of course, been testing it with the Better Futures Plus companies in recent weeks. If I can encourage all of our delegates to make use, full use of the chat window and also the raise hands function if you want to put any questions to our panel. As always, I have a few questions up my sleeve to get things started. And I spotted in the chat window, I think that one question that had been raised, I think may have been addressed already by Ivor. So I'm not going to turn back to that. But if I'm going to encourage Councillor Costigan perhaps to switch your camera back on if you're able. And I'm also aware that we have two other experts, I think, with us from the Ealing team, both Joanne Mortensen and also Carol Sam, and it'd be great to hear from you before our time is up on your sort of reflections on some of the challenges for local businesses in actually getting started on this journey. But my first question, I think, is to Martina and Barney, from the testing that you've been doing of the Climate Essentials tool, just how easy or not, as the case may be, has it been for businesses getting started and doing their first sort of baseline assessment?
Yep, Barney, do you want to go or should I?
After you.
Okay, cool. Yes, as we said, we are working with the pilot with the 12 businesses, and most of them have completed the carbon calculations already. And it's the feedback that we have so far is that it's quite easy to use, it's quite engaging. But some businesses, especially when they have very complex operations, they might require some time to gather all the information, the financial data. So that they might take a few time, but if you have that information in Zero already, or you have that readily available, it shouldn't take more than, let's say, a few hours or maybe like a couple of days to get that information, and then you are good to go to get the first carbon footprint for your business.
Does that echo your experience, Barney?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I've been demoing a few carbon calculators over the past sort of 3 or 4 months as I put this sustainability toolkit together, and my sort of one reflection would be that that really the first bit is getting started, and even if maybe your data is not completely in sync, but to just get a broad understanding of your scope 1, 2, 3 in emissions. And taking that first step is really eye-opening, that we found with businesses, and then you can, once you have that kind of holistic view, you can look at where you need to make the changes.
I wonder, Joanne, if you're able to sort of come in. I know you're in the thick of Ealing Council's sort of operations, trying to address both internally and externally the carbon footprint challenge. What's been your experience from the sort of authority perspective of trying to get a handle on emissions numbers?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, wow, what has been the challenge? Probably drawing our line around what is the scope of what we're measuring, and then, just being really clear about what makes an impact, what activity makes an impact, and trying to focus limited resources there. So yeah, I think for us, it was, on our internal carbon emissions, I guess you would call them scope 1 and scope 2 for those of you in the audience that are familiar with that jargon, but sort of, what the energy that we directly consume, that's been the easiest information to get hold of. And also, we have great control over how we use that energy. So that's where we've been focusing. The trickier stuff is working with our supply chain and sort of using our influence to try and help everyone come along on the journey. But I think that that's an opportunity as well, because it probably will affect, some people on this call, or, some small businesses and large businesses that we work with. If they start seeing that messaging from us as a leader in that space, then they're likely to start seeing the value of doing it for themselves as well, not least to win contracts.
Absolutely, it's a helpful financial incentive to tackle those carbon emissions. I mean, when we went through the process at West London Business, I mentioned earlier that we discovered we had 170 tonnes in a sort of typical pre-COVID year of emissions, largely tied into our events programme and travel. And whilst we're clearly trying to chip away at that as the years go by, we realise we also need to spend more on carbon offsets to mitigate our footprint. I've popped a link in the chat to the particular provider that we're still working with, the sort of carbon club that sees us, I think, by direct debit, probably investing a few hundred each month now into sort of forestry projects here in the UK. But I know for a lot of businesses it can be pretty overwhelming, the range of options when it comes to carbon offsets. And I wonder, Martina, whether you have a take on how to navigate what type of offsets to purchase. And I might then go back again to Joanne for a kind of Ealing Council perspective on what local opportunities there might be in future. But Martina.
Sure. I think, there is a lot of controversy around carbon offsets, but I think they are a great way to try to reduce, let's say, balance the emissions that as a business you cannot avoid or reduce. So if you want as a business buy carbon credits, you need to make sure that those carbon projects were verified by a third party, usually the gold standards. And these third party auditors make sure that the carbon or the projects that you support are real, are additional, are measurable, and are verified. So you're going to also find a lot of type of different carbon offsets once you have found that the carbon offsets are the projects that were accredited. You have maybe renewable energy, you have hydro, you have biogas projects, you have solar panels, you have wind, you have reforestation. So it depends on what your business chooses to support when they buy carbon credits. And a good report that I found that was published last year was from Oxford University, and they created a taxonomy for carbon offsets. They created a table where you can see the type of projects that are maybe less efficient, are a bit more riskier when it comes to capture the carbon emissions. A good example is, for example, reforestation. Obviously, the trees absorb carbon emissions when they grow, but you need to make sure that after 50 years, those trees are still there. So once you make sure that the carbon credits are verified, then you select the type of carbon credit or project that you want to support. Is it a bit more riskier, but good for the environment, as like the forest, or is it a bit less riskier and more technology savvy, like renewable energy? And then you have prices to select, and location. There is a lot of price variability when it comes to carbon offsets. There are a few projects that go for a few cents or maybe a few pounds per ton of CO2. Then you have a bit more pricey ones like reforestation that can go 7 or 10 pounds per ton of carbon removed from the environment. And there was a report that came out 2 days ago that said that carbon offsets, are actually quite cheap right now. And the price is expected to come up a bit. So if your business wants to buy carbon credits, I suggest you do it now. And I think that's it from my part. I don't know if Barney wants to add something.
Yeah, sure. I think when sort of looking and you've measured your emissions, there's really two elements that make up best practice for your net zero pathway. I think the detail that Martina's just said on that removals pathway in terms of those carbon offsets, but then there's also the reductions. So by looking at getting a holistic view of your carbon emissions, you can look at where you can reduce and really make that full decarbonisation by reducing your emissions on an absolute basis. This can be through sort of moving your energy supplier and some of the things that Ivor touched upon, and also the community aspects that Councillor touched on before as well. But then it's finding that balance really between the two, and also engaging in the sort of medium to long term is engaging your supply chain to really take them on their journey with you.
And I spotted in the Climax community tool is that suppliers button, which I think is going to become active to kind of make it easier to reach out to your sort of top sort of high impact suppliers.
Yeah, we have lots of ideas to how to improve climate essentials. I mean, in the future, we want to have an offset option. So if you buy, let's say, 5 or 10,000 carbon credits, that will be take into account for your carbon reduction journey. And we also want to engage suppliers, because we know Scope 3 emissions are very, very difficult to calculate. And a good idea is if we can embed all your suppliers into the platform, so you can have a very eagle view of what is going on with your suppliers, and you can easily engage with them to try to help them all reduce carbon emissions together.
Yeah, at West London Business, we discovered one of our sort of top 5, of course, was our pension spend. And so, one of the areas we'll be looking at over the next 6 months is whether we need to perhaps change our default pension fund to a lower impact, sort of climate neutral option. I see you've shared a link to that Oxford report, Martina, in the chat window for anyone that wants to sort of visual map of the different options in the carbon offset space. I wonder if I could bring Joanne back in for your take on this sort of offset opportunity. I mean, could we see local projects in Ealing that are perhaps being sort of formally accredited and are securing sort of carbon offset spend from local businesses or indeed the council?
Yeah, we're certainly exploring that. I mean, as the other speakers have said, our priority for ourselves and sort of our message to the community is that we really need to do as much as we can around reducing carbon emissions in the first place, and not using offsetting is sort of a get out of jail free card, because that won't do anything, it won't help us overall. And so we'd love to, we contemplate in our strategy that was adopted in January, how we might make some local offsetting opportunities available. That's an ambition right now. So that's something we'll work on in the next couple of years, and put something together. But you're right to say that it does need to be sort of certified, and we need to be able to have people be able to stand behind, or we need to stand behind sort of what that funding would go towards locally. But I think that there's really great opportunities in terms of improving green infrastructure in the borough, which is, tree planting and looking at natural infrastructure to help us with flood alleviation, from storm events, for instance. And also, we're really keen on building more renewable energy generation within borough boundaries. We think that's a really sort of underutilized opportunity, or we haven't accessed that opportunity in a really wonderful way yet. And we've made, some progress towards that with our schools and our own housing estate, and even our own corporate estate. We've done bits and pieces here and there, but I feel like we need to make a really solid push at that for, covering as many rooftops as possible in the borough, to be honest. And GLA has a great tool that they've done some mapping for what the capacity is for our rooftops. So I think, we're well set up to kind of do some of that picking apart and putting together our strategy for how to invest locally in offsetting carbon emissions.
Fantastic. Well, that sort of segues rather neatly into what was being my sort of last sort of question line of inquiry with the panel. Councillor Costigan sort of highlighted at the start that the council is very open to sort of businesses coming forward with ideas, or indeed challenges that they're grappling with. And I think my sense is, from conversations with a number of sort of companies in our network, that there are a chunk of interventions that are relatively easy to do. Another chunk that are fairly kind of specialist and sector specific, but are perhaps within your control as a business. And then there's a sort of final third where actually you've really got to start collaborating with other businesses, perhaps in your supply chain, and indeed with local authority sort of partners, because the infrastructure around you has got to change if you're ever going to get to net zero. I wonder whether, whether that sort of prompts any thoughts or any of our panel in terms of some of the sort of opportunities that you're sensing could come through in the sort of months and in years ahead. I'm wondering, sort of Martina or Barney, we were talking this morning when we were up in Harrow on our tour with, of course, a packaging company, Swisspack, who are in the Better Futures Plus programme, and that they were highlighting their frustration with sort of flexible sort of packaging, that at the moment so much of it's going to landfill and creating some energy from waste, but actually not the most efficient and best use, certainly not a circular economy approach to handling that waste. Did it leave you with any particular impressions or thoughts, Martina or Barney, in terms of what might happen on that front?
Well, for me, I would really like to see more case studies or more projects as industrial symbiosis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm sorry. It's a way of businesses to come up together and a consortium to say, okay, someone else's waste is my raw material. And I know there are a few case studies here in the UK, especially in the sugarcane industry, where they use all the raw materials or the products, so they can start creating that circular way of living. I think there are huge opportunities of that. I know it's very complex to achieve that, and there's a lot of legal issues that may come into place, but I mean, the information is already there, things are already happening, especially for biorefineries, sugarcane, and other different case studies. So I think promoting a circular way of living and promoting participation between businesses to try to reduce waste and upcycling, I think that is a great opportunity here in the UK.
Is it the Kalundborg symbiosis in Denmark, something that is often profiled as the kind of sort of international exemplar? And we've been talking, I think, increasingly in the Park Royal context, of course, that if there was going to be an opportunity anywhere, certainly in London, it would seem to be that trying to join more of the dots in Park Royal to get one company's waste to be the input for another company's production to start to become a reality. Carol, I know we've got you on the call today. Carol Sam, from the Economic Development team. Yes. What's your sense of the sort of appetite for businesses to start having these conversations?
It's interesting because we have, as part of the work that I was doing with, as you know, with Amelia, colleagues at Slough, we started to look at what a toolkit could look like and the appetite for businesses picking this up. So we actually did a sample survey, face-to-face interviews with a number of businesses, some in part royal, interestingly. What emerged from those is kind of a mixed bag, and we group these in three particular mindsets. So what you have is businesses who are really passionate about it in their own personal life, that, you know, they care about the environment. So this translates quite easily into their work and looking at their own business and seeking out themselves opportunities to reducing carbon emissions and actually deliver a business that's more sustainable. So in terms of getting those businesses on board to adopt a toolkit of any sort and start managing their own emissions, they're already on the way, and those we see as the champions. And I think we need to engage more with those businesses to see as the ambassadors, champions, because what emerged then is the other two mindsets. You've got those who actually are quite passionate about it, they care, but perhaps not enough, and really look at the landscape in terms of support as a really complex minefield of where to go to get information. So if anything, in terms of the role of the local authority, we've got a great opportunity to simplify the information that's out there, pull it together and share it with them. And I know there are a number of tools that colleagues at West London Business have been looking at, and we ourselves have been looking at. And then you've got the other extreme of businesses who actually don't particularly care, and they will only start caring unless they see the impact on their bottom line. So if you think of it in those three approaches, is how do we then hook in those real champions as good examples? But I think from a resource point of view, there are opportunities even in our own area of work, because we are starting to deliver a number of business support programs. And it's at that point, because we will be engaging with businesses, is whether we use, the carbon emission opportunity as a hook. So, we could say, look, if you want to come on board and benefit from some of this support, you will need to engage with these tools that are available and provide the information. Or also, we've got other avenues in terms of our own procurement processes. Be explicit and make it as a condition of any businesses receiving contract. You need to start making sure. So I think we knew, and we're working with Joe anyway, to look at a number of opportunities to align where some of our individual projects can help to actually cascade and get the message out there and getting business on board. That's
fantastic. No, I think three really helpful groupings to kind of clarify the different conversations that we're all having at the moment. And I think we're, with the Better Futures Plus program, I think we're very clear when we went out to recruit that we were going for that first group of individuals that already had the right mindset, and we could kind of accelerate them along the way. And actually, we made it a condition for those very committed individuals that they'd be signing up to achieve net zero by 2030. So quite an aggressive sort of carbon descent sort of plan for a small business. I think finally I'm going to circle back to Councillor Costigan to get your reflections on sort of what you've heard and perhaps also what your sense is from conversations that you have out and about with local businesses as to what they're up against, because I think we all have to remember, of course, that we're still trying to pull through to the other side of a pandemic. So for some businesses it is just a case of survival right now.
Absolutely, and I think actually it fits really well with the points that Carol has just been making, and really about making this stuff relevant to businesses who, like you say, are struggling now with COVID, and this may, not be anywhere near the top of their agenda. I mean, I said at the start for Ealing Council, we have, really ramped up our commitment to tackling the climate crisis, and basically, we're totally upping our game on this. But as part of that, because we can't just do it ourselves, it means we've got to be much more leaders across Ealing, and we've got to bring business with us. And I think actually what I'm passionate about is making sure people actually understand what we're on about, because so many people, like I said at the start, they have no idea. COP26, it means zero to a hairdresser on the corner of my street in North Holt. It means nothing. So they won't be involved in any of this at all. And so what I absolutely, we're talking about and who we can start making some fast progress with, I think we have to change our whole way of talking about this. And, some of the points that have come up today, I think have been brilliant because we've made it clear why this is relevant to businesses. It's about the disruption of their supply chain. It's about their, energy bills so they can save money. It's about the demand from the public. And it's about, future-proofing their business, making decisions now that they might have to make down the road anyway, so they can, make them much better now. But we have to, translate COP26 net zero by 2030. We have to translate that into those really concrete things that my hairdresser cares about. But I think, I really loved seeing, Martina's presentation and the really, very practical things that we're able to advise businesses to do and how we can show how that has an impact. So we've got the tools. It very much seems to me we have amazing tools, and some of the stuff here today and Ivor as well has been, absolutely fantastic. It's the language. We need to find the right language so that people know this is actually, so important, and it's important to their business. Like I say, it's not just about social justice. Many of them, that is why they care, but actually it's about their business as well, and we need to do that work better. And Ealing Council, we are absolutely committed to, like I say, completely upping our game on this, and we want to become a leader in the country really in getting people behind this initiative. So it's been brilliant to be involved today.
Thank you so much, Councillor. Brilliant summation there of some of the sort of the plain English advice that local businesses are going to need to crack on and see the direct relevance to their own organisations. For anyone that wants to find out more and follow up, please do go to westlondon.com/race to zero, and you will find your way to all of the variety of tools that are out there, some of which will be just the right fit for your business. If you email my colleague barney.close@westlondon.com, he can email you an Excel kind of calculator just to get started straight away with understanding your business's carbon footprint, but he can also make that introduction across to the Climate Essentials team if you fancy having a go with their very user-friendly calculator. All that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to all of you for joining us, particularly my panel this afternoon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.